a couple weeks ago, we had a podcast where we talked about all the leaks that were coming out, how Apple was going to have an event. And we said, okay, this is what we expected to come out in the event. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure we got everything correct in it, right? We talked about the iMac get an M4. We talked about the Mac Mini get an M4 and possibly a redesign. And we talked about the MacBook Pros just getting the M4 chip. So M4, M4 Pro, M4 Max, no redesign there. And that's exactly what happened. Now, some people were saying that they weren't going to have an event. There were just going to be press releases. But even when I heard that, I was like, I'm sure there's going to be some sort of production. Even if it's just for the Mac Mini, there will be some sort of production just to show off this new design that they're rumored to have. I think, so we're recording this on Wednesday, the 30th. I think today a bunch of tech YouTubers, columnists, bloggers have been invited to Apple Park to get hands-on with the new Mac Mini and all the new products that they announced. So the three products, the iMac, Mac Mini, MacBook Pro. On Monday, they showed off the iMac. Tuesday, Mac Mini. Today, Wednesday, MacBook Pros. And an honorable mention, I guess, goes out to the MacBook Airs, even though they didn't update the MacBook Airs, but they did say that they would also be started at 16 gigabytes of RAM. So for the longest time, MacBook Airs have started, or not even just MacBook Airs, pretty much all Macs, except for their Pro devices, have started at 8 gigabytes of RAM, and then you had to pay an extra like $200 to bump it up to 16 gigabytes when they probably should have started with 16 gigabytes. So they've been bumped up. The MacBook Airs have been bumped up to 16 gigabytes for the M2 and the M3 versions, and they're not costing any more. So that's, I guess, one thing that's kind of a theme for all the products announced this week. They all start at 16 gigabytes of RAM at a minimum. Now, the M4 Pro, M4 Max start higher, but the minimum is 16 gigabytes of RAM, and they didn't raise the prices on their entry-level things. They're not cheaper, but they're giving us better value for what I guess people were already paying. So in my eyes, that's a win coming from Apple. I know on our last podcast, we talked about how with this redesign coming to the Mac Mini, we wouldn't be surprised if redesign plus 16 gigabytes of RAM, okay, you're paying extra for all these new things and it becomes less of a value product. But happy to say the entry-level M4 Mac Mini, same price, more RAM, new design. But yeah, out of all of the things that they announced, whether it's the iMac, Mac Mini, MacBook Pro or Air, what was the most, I guess, what caught your attention the most? What were you most, if at all, what were you excited about going into this week? And after it's essentially done, what turned out to, I guess, follow through on that excitement?
What stole the show is the Mac Mini. I'm curious to get your opinion. We've talked many times on and off the podcast about Mac Mini versus MacBook Air. The MacBook Air now gets 16 gigabytes of RAM, but this Mac Mini, it gave a lot of what we were asking for. How do you feel about all of these products overall? And then also, is the Mac Mini doing it for you? Is the MacBook Air doing it for you? Did they fix a lot of what you were waiting for with these products?
I complained quite a bit on our preview podcast about how much would be upset if they got rid of USB-A, and how it didn't make any sense to have a desktop without USB-A. And it's not the end of the world. Do I think it was needed? No. I'm sure they could have exact same design as before, put the new M4 chip, M4 Pro chip in it. Everyone would still love it. 16 gigs of RAM also, everyone would still love it. No one would complain. If you had the same exact port selection with 2 extra USB-A ports, and also it's like, in terms of bandwidth on your chip, that doesn't take up that much. Especially thinking that the M2 and M2 Pro had Thunderbolt ports and USB-A ports. This new chip that's supposed to be so much better than those chips, you can't have USB-A. No, you can, you just don't want to. But anyways, I like the redesign. It's much smaller than I thought it would be. I mean, it's a little bigger than an Apple TV 4K, which is what everyone was saying, but it's still surprisingly small. It really looks like a mini Mac Studio. That's what it looks like, just minus the SD card slot on the front. So I like the design of it. And we talked about this before. I'm just going to have accessory like dongles and attachments now for my Mac Mini, because I'm going to get a Mac Mini. I'm going to get the M4 Pro Mac Mini. I've been talking for a long time about how good the Mac Mini is, how it's the best value, how I've wanted to upgrade to it. And now it's finally time. The only things that kind of strike me as weird, or not the only things, but the two main things that strike me as weird with this Mac Mini is that the headphone jack is on the front, which I guess they're assuming that everyone has AirPods. So if you need to plug something in, it's like an actual like pair of headphones. It's weird that the headphone jack is on the front for a desktop computer, and the power button is on the bottom of it somehow. Like, maybe they just expect you to turn it on and leave it on completely, but I don't get why they decided to move the power button. Like, yeah, it's smaller, but once again, it's not so small that you can't have the power button somewhere on the back or even somewhere on the front. Like, that's an interesting design choice. Other than that, I think it's great. It's a cool looking device. And yeah, Thunderbolt 5. I didn't even know Thunderbolt 5 was a thing, honestly, until Apple was like, oh yeah, Mac Mini is going to get Thunderbolt 5. And they said that, this is the first Mac with Thunderbolt 5, the first Mac, anything with Thunderbolt 5. But it's technically not out, and both the Mac Mini and MacBook Pros are coming out next Friday. So they're gonna both have Thunderbolt 5 at the same time. So it's not like you can use the Mac Mini now before it, but it's, I guess, technically the first announced product with Thunderbolt 5. But all around, I thought it was a good event. iMac, it's a popular device, so glad that it got the upgrade. Glad that the port situation got slightly better on it. MacBook Pros, like you said, they update them every year, so not a ton of surprise there. But that getting Thunderbolt 5, also exciting. And the Mac Mini, yeah, I was definitely looking forward to the Mac Mini the most out of everything. And I think it definitely, nothing else changed in terms of its design. So I'm definitely the most, I guess, excited by the presentation of the Mac Mini. And just, why is the headphone jack on the front? Why is the power button on the bottom? That's my only two questions for the Mac Mini. If you've made it this far and you enjoyed the video, please hit subscribe, hit the like button, and I'll see you in the next one.